Welcome back, Bantwana Benkosi. In this segment, we are going to look into this question of the Employment Equity Act and the DA's challenge. I am joined by the Democratic Alliance Labour lawyer or Labour expert and DA spokesperson on Labour, Michael Bagraim. Welcome to Power Talk and thanks very much for creating time for us. Welcome indeed.
Thank you ever so much. I'm honored to be on the station with you. It feels strange for me because I know you as the Honourable.
I'm not so honourable anymore.
No, very, very honourable. And I used to love listening to your speeches. We didn't agree ever. And we obviously were unhappy, but it is a strange situation for me to be talking to you on air. So please forgive my shakiness.
No, you'll be fine, Michael. I'm sure you'll be fine. I also want to welcome the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, the legendary Zwelinzima Vavi. Tata, welcome to Power Talk.
Good morning to you, the good doctor. Good morning to all of your colleagues at the studio and to everybody that is listening. Good morning to Mike. Don't shake. I'm going to shake you more.
He'll do the shaking. I'll just do the facilitation. Let's start with you, Michael. Just break down for us the DA's court case and specifically its prayers.
Yeah, thank you. I will. Everyone seems to be, and at least I'll be able to explain this to you because other stations haven't understood. This is not a case per se against the actual legislation, the employment equity legislation. This is actually focused on Section 15A. There is another prayer that has been focused on, and that is a technical one, and that is to do with the actual tagging of the case. In other words, and you'll understand, Doctor, that, and I won't call you honourable, but Doctor, you'll understand that the tagging is actually vital in Parliament itself. I'm not an expert. I was never a chief whip, so I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that seems to have a lot of relevance, and in fact was argued quite strongly in the courtroom, but it's got nothing, that tagging has got nothing to do with the actual equity. So if you don't mind, I'll put that prayer to one side. The real prayer is the 15 capital A, and that is the change in the legislation and the regulations from the regulations as they existed, which took into account the circumstances, the business, their ability to fill the positions, etc., where this time Minister Meth, and we can't blame her entirely because it was the previous minister, as you know, in the previous dispensation, that put together the idea of 15A, where you would have not a quota, not a target, but a quota. And we're saying that in terms of the actual Constitution, now we as a Democratic Alliance are a party of the Constitution. We're not calling for the scrapping of the Constitution. We actually have a great belief in the Constitution. And in fact, it's the cornerstone of everything that we do in the DA is our Constitution. Well, we're saying in terms of Section 9.2 of the Constitution, that does allow, the whole Constitution says you can't discriminate against people. But Section 9.2 says you can have fair discrimination to achieve redress. Now, we want redress as the DA, we want the redress, but it's got to be fair discrimination. And that is defined by the courts in the past as being, it can't be draconian, it can't be set in stone like you would see the Ten Commandments. You wouldn't be able to set it in stone. So we're saying this is not fair in the sense that the minister, and I'm going to call it Minister Meth because she's now inherited this, the minister has got these targets and she's saying, 5 years, you've got to get there. We don't care how you get there, but you better get there. Now, that creates problems, and I'm saying that's unfair. Our lawyers have said it's unfair. And it appears that the government has argued on the basis of, well, we do take into account certain factors like ability and what you've got availability and all that sort of thing. We take it into account, but they don't argue. They don't take it to the next step. Well, regardless of all that, the minister set a target, and all the case is about, to put it into layman's language, is when you set a target, you're supposed to call it a quota rather, because if you don't, and if we set the target, if you don't have the ability to take into account why it's fair discrimination, then you are falling foul of all the law in this country. So that's what this case is about. It's not about, and these discussions always veer into whether you agree with employment equity, whether you agree with social engineering. This case is actually quite focused. It's 15A only. And we're waiting now with bated breath because we can argue the law and we can argue all sorts of other things, but we're waiting with bated breath as to what the judge says. I have a strong feeling, very strong feeling, that the judge might actually kick for touch and say, I agree with the prayer for the tagging, and actually not deal with the actual real point as whether 15A or not. And I also got a feeling that whoever loses is probably going to take it on appeal. Now, I'm not in the DA's legal team, and in fact, it's all above my pay grade. I'm effectively a backbencher. So all I can say is I think if the ANC or the government loses this case, they'll take it on appeal. I think if the DA loses this case, and I'm not talking from knowledge, I think they'll probably take it on appeal. And who will win? The lawyers. The lawyers will get a lot of money out of all of this. It's an interesting topic, and it's made people very emotional. You know, and even from my side, me talking to you now, I'm pale male, and I had the benefit of apartheid as a pale male. Let's not beat about the bush. So I was lucky. I had a father that could send me to a private school. I had a father that could send me to a university, could afford to get me some extra tuition because I'm not that clever, and was able to eventually help me when I wanted to open up my own law firm. So I've had the benefit of this system of apartheid. And so it's very embarrassing on occasions when I have to say, but hold on a minute, we've now had 30 years of employment equity, and it hasn't worked. And who's at fault? Is it the business community? Is it the legislation? Who's at fault? Well, we can argue till the cows come home. I think the legislation has failed us, and I think we need to find another piece of legislation to get the redress that we all want. The DAs come on record, they want redress. We need to reflect the demographics of the country. And if we don't reflect the demographics of the country, we failed. We failed the Constitution, and we believe in the Constitution. The Constitution calls for redress. So sorry to give you that mouthful.
But I mean, just before I get the GS in, precisely how does the DA propose to arrive at the achievement of redress without these laws?
Well, it's quite simple. And we've done that experiment now in the Western Cape, and we're getting there. We're not quite there because we've still got to, we're a party of law. So if there's a law that we don't agree with, we still have to adhere to it. So we had to agree with the usage of employment equity in the Western Cape. And we believe it's holding us back. But what we've done is we believe that the small business community is the job creation entity of the future. Economists around the world, it's not just South Africa, are telling us small business creates jobs. Small business is the engine room of growth for job creation right across the world, and especially here around our neighbors. A perfect example is Nigeria. So big business are having jobless growth. They're looking back at this and smiling because they can afford whatever they can afford, and they mechanize, they computerize, they outsource, they do all things, but they're not growing. They're getting richer, but they're not growing.
So let me understand this, Mike. In what way does the redress objective affect small business? Why wouldn't small businesses have to be subjected to do not sort of perpetuate white supremacist or white privileged employment standards of apartheid?
Okay, so let me answer that. Bottom line is, small business is going out to the community, whoever they can employ. They're not getting people who've got fancy CVs. They're not looking for white people. They're looking for people near the small businesses that are willing to work and not get big salaries. Now, I believe, and we've seen this in the Western Cape, if you give small businesses as much leeway as possible, and in fact, government agrees with me that, as you've seen, because they've exempted small business under 50 employees from the legislation altogether. So they're saying exactly what I'm saying. Government's saying that small business is going to create jobs, we'll exempt them from employment equity, but go out there, employ people who are fit for purpose, obviously. Never mind whether you're white.
So you already have that. So what remains the problem? Government gives you that, okay, if you are employing less than 50 people, you can employ all men or you can employ all whites, whatever.
But
what is still the crisis that you are?
We're saying that that's good, but it hasn't been there before. This is new. It hasn't been. It's not law yet. It's going to be law. We hope it'll be law.
Okay.
And this whole thing gets rubbed out. But what's happened is we brought unemployment down in the Western Cape down to below 19%. Because SAFTU tells us
because you didn't implement employment equity.
We had to implement employment equity. We had to do other things. You asked me, what are we going to do? We're going to try our utmost to get rid of red tape. We're going to try our utmost to educate. We're going to try our utmost to give funding to small businesses. We're doing all that in the Western Cape. Yeah. And we're getting somewhere. It's not fast enough, but we're getting there.
GS, your take. Well, I mean, there's a lot of points that Michael has raised, but specifically, maybe if you could start for us, your reaction to the court case.
Well, we are very angry. Yeah. We are angry. We are disgusted that the Democratic Alliance, 31 years down the line, seeks to use the courts to attack transformation in the labor market, as they are attacking transformation everywhere else, from the national minimum wage to the expropriation Act, to Bill Act, to the National Health Insurance, anything that is fundamentally touching on the interest of their core constituency, they are attacked. Now, I wanted to, before going back to the history that Mike has gone into, just address this issue that we are talking about. He says they are not opposed to the entire Act, and their focus is only on Section 15A of the Act as amended. Now, I want to read to you and to Mike, what does that 15A say? And let me read. It says, the minister may, after consultation with the relevant sectors and on the advice of the Commission for Employment Equity, identify national economic sectors and determine numerous targets to ensure the equitable representation of suitably qualified people from designated groups at all occupational levels in the workplace. Point 2, it says, the minister may publish any proposed targets for public comment, giving interested parties at least 30 days to respond. Thirdly, when setting these targets, the minister must take into account the demographic profile of the national and regional economic active population, the sectoral, sub-sectoral characteristics, the degree of underrepresentation of designated groups, available skills within the sector, any other relevant factors, including progress made. That's 15A to you, good doctor. That's what they are taking. Now, he is waffling now. He doesn't tell you exactly what is their problem. He says, well, we are for the Constitution, we are for the regress, and we hate apartheid. And but no, you can fool those that was to be fooled. The DA has mastered the strategy of giving black people a rhetoric as if they are with them, with one hand. On the other hand, they have mastered the strategy of advancing the interest of their real constituency, which is the conservative white males. They want to keep voting for them. And let me unpack this, good doctor.
Yeah.
The DA models itself as a liberal party. A liberal party agrees on markets, must deliver to humanity, unemployment, inequality, poverty, opportunities, training, healthcare, education, everything must be delivered by the market. That's the liberal ideology. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, the DA has mastered the strategy of maintaining the electorate that vote for the white parties, and inverted commas, that are keen to protect the privileges that were accumulated over hundreds of years of colonialism and almost 40 years of apartheid. They look at how they look at the VAT issue. When they speak about the VAT, you can be convinced that these people are really speaking for black majority and or the working class. But when you undress that to look at it in detail, you will see, no, these people are anti-tax in general. They don't want a state that have capacity to redress and or to intervene in the economy. That's what their liberal ideology is about. But then they have this white constituency to protect. In addition to the liberal ideology, they have these white people who they wanting to get out of the AWB, the conservative parties that represent the white privileges and their interests. And so they will say no to VAT, but more importantly, no to initial minimum wage, no to BILA, NHI, Expropriation Act, and no to transformation. Keep things as they are, because we're using the liberal ideology. The markets will solve these issues. Be patient. They will trickle down the benefits to your side. All you have to do is to focus on growing the economy, which we agree. Nothing can happen without a growing economy. But that's where they end. The state must step back from the economic activity. It mustn't talk about nationalization. It mustn't talk about industrialization. It mustn't talk about driving secondary economies from the agriculture, mining, anything. It mustn't be involved directly in the economy. Leave everything to the markets. They will solve all of your problems. Be patient. That's what we are talking about today, the good doctor. And now, without wasting time, this employment equity doesn't fall out of no space. It's not a mere policy reform. It is a constitutional response to entrenched racial and gender inequalities. It was passed in 1998 so that it can undo the damage that was done to South Africans by the Mines and Works Act of 1911 that was expanded during the apartheid, that legally reserved skilled jobs for white workers, that excluded the black South Africans from the meaningful career progression. This is a response to the Wage Act of 1925, where the white government introduced initial minimum wage for white workers, but in legislation said the white and the black workers must never earn an equal wage, even if they can do the same. But it goes further to say, through the Industrial Conciliation Act, the black workers cannot do the same job as the white worker in any case. then introduced the bad education in 1955 to make sure that black people are undereducated and are restricted to manual labor, entrenching those economic inferiority for black people. That's the history. This is the genesis that we are doing with. Now, Mike says there was no progress since 1994. That's not true. The dawn of the Employment Equity Act in 1998, the first commission report indicated that the white population, which constitute less than 10%, dominated the top management and skills position by up to 80%. And that black people who constitute 80% were still trapped in these inferior jobs, and the white employees were 87% of the top management, and the black people were only 13%. Can you believe? That's the Africans, Arabs, and Indians. But if you look at the Africans only, they only constituted 6% of top management. Today, in terms of the latest report of 2022-23, that 87% have gone down to 61% in terms of the white domination in the top position. And Africans now occupy 17.2%, even though they constitute around 70% of the employment active population. The so-called coloreds are 6.1%. The Indians are 11.6%. And so the total black people who are the women. This is very important. The women are still dominated at a mere 2.5% of the top management position. The people with disabilities, a mere 1.8% representation, despite them being 5% of the total population. This is what the minister then responds to say, no, for 30 years there has been no fast progress enough. Yes, there's a progress, but it has not gone fast enough. It has not gone deep enough. Let me have inspirational sectoral targets to put pressure on everybody using the criteria that I've already read to you to go to these targets. The TA says we are going to the Constitutional Court to make sure that this never sees the light in South Africa. We are disgusted.
Let me take the headlines, GS, and we still have another 30 minutes on the other side to tease this out. Maybe we're going to come together into some common agreement with Michael. Maybe the DA, I don't know. This is Power Talk Bantwana Benkosi with me, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. We're going to take the headlines at 11:30 with Nyakalo Tefu, our Pope.
Getting you what you need to know. Power Talk, weekdays 9 a.m. to noon on Power 98.7.
Welcome back, Bantwana Benkosi. If you want to join the conversation, 0861987000 on this question of the Employment Equity Act. I want to go back to Michael and just make a small point, maybe two, to which I'd like your reaction on. One is, you know, in the various apartheid legislations and legislations related to labor laws before 1948, you won't find a deliberate sort of targeting exclusion in most of the cases of women in professions, of women in skills development, and all of it. Just happened in most of the cases. And that shows you that even outside of, or in the absence of an actual legal framework, because a society believes already a priori in the inferiority of women, without telling them, they don't take them to school, they don't skill them, and when they do the same jobs as men, they get paid less. Part of what happens with that experience, it should inform us, it seems to me, that even if you were to say, remove these laws, you will not be able to achieve transformation in the same way you couldn't under apartheid for women. What's your reaction to that?
Simple, that the history of the world has shown a little bit of discrimination, but the business community can't be blamed for that. And
why?
Because they take in people who apply for jobs, who have been educated, who are fit for purpose. But let me give you an example. Government, which is, I presume you're going to tell us that government has got no discrimination embedded in it at this stage. The current government.
Unfair discrimination. I would argue that they don't have basis.
Hold on. I haven't finished.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No problem. Government, since the advent of employment equity, has said, well, Mr. Vavi tells us that about 5% of our population is disabled. The latest figures are telling us it's close to 7%. Government, for the last 30 years, have tried to bring in people that were previously disadvantaged to work for government. It's the biggest employer in the country by far, and it's probably the best jobs in the country is through government. When we look at it and we have a look at people with disabilities, government has told us that they have, and I remember this now from 10 years ago, that they set a target for themselves of 3% disability within government. And they went on a campaign. You might recall that government went on a campaign to employ people with disabilities. Well, they've never reached 1%. Never reached 1%. For a whole lot of reasons. I don't have the time here, but there's a whole lot of reasons why they were not able to. And where we are now, it's still not at 1% working for government. And so you can use the same argument with women, because what's happening is that you need people that have moved into the system, that want to go into the workplace, that want to have the ability to do the job and have the ability to do the job. And I'm not pointing a finger at government. All I'm saying
let me ask you in a different way, Michael. Just on that point, forgive me about that. Yeah, you'll finish. Just what makes you have faith in the sort of self-conduct of people in business to do the right thing when they grow up in a society that produces all of us to have discrimination against women, even if they've got skills, to have discrimination against black people, even if they have skills? What makes you think that on their own, without being forced through legislation, that they will not hire skilled women, skilled black people? What makes you think that they will do that on their own if they are not forced to?
Well, what makes me think it is the rest of the world. The rest of the world doesn't have employment equity legislation. The rest of Africa doesn't have employment equity legislation, and they are reflecting the demographics of the country. So what makes me think that is every other country in the world.
Do you know this for a fact that there are no ethnic problems, for an example, in Nigeria? Do you know this for a fact? I want you to think again. You are saying,
yes,
do you know for a fact that in the African continent, there is no problem of employment when it comes to women? There is no problem of employment when it comes to certain ethnic minorities? Think again. Do you know this for a fact?
No, I don't. But what I do know is that in Nigeria, they're reflecting the demographics of the country.
Again, you're wrong. There's a big problem of women employment in Nigeria.
Well, the people tell me, and we looking at the business community, that when someone applies for a job and they've got the ability, they don't look to see if they're women or if they're black, colored, Indian, white. They're not discriminating against the white people either. They're reflecting the demographics of the country.
When you started, Michael, when you started, you made a powerful sort of confession. This society here in the southern tip of the continent is the only country in the world with a white settler community presided over by a predominantly black government. There's no other government like that in the world. It is also incidentally the only community in the world. Maybe another one is Israel, but it is the only community in this continent where there was apartheid, where this white settler community practiced job reservation in the Calabar. They practiced Bantu education to basically dumbify generations and generations of African people, practiced discrimination with regards to wages. How do you change that? The business people were in on it, from mining to financial sector. Everybody was in on it. How do you disarticulate? Majority of those people like yourself are still alive. Why do you think we can trust you to now no longer be discriminating in the ways in which you hire when you did barely 30 years ago?
Well, let me explain.
Yeah.
And it's quite simple. It's quite simple. I'm a practicing labor lawyer.
Yeah.
I've been practicing for 40 years. I have been practicing since the advent of the Employment Equity Act and all the other labor, there are 11 pieces of labor legislation. Any one person can come forward and say, I didn't get the job because I'm black, or I'm a woman, or I am disabled.
Yeah.
Any person come right now. Now, I have in the last 20 years done cases for people who have come to see me who said, I've been discriminated against because I didn't get the job because. And why? Because I'm disabled. I've had lots of disabled cases. I not one occasion, actually it was once, not more than one occasion, that person's come to me and said, I didn't get the job because I'm black. In the last 20 years, not one. Now they've got the legislation, it's there, it's able, you're able. We've got the Equity Act, we've had unfair labor practice, we've had the Labor Relations Act, basic conditions of employment, everything. I haven't had one person come forward. So it's all very well to say to me, how come the business community can be relied upon to have anyone that applies? I don't know.
No, but that was that's a bit unfair. That's a bit unfair, Michael. Because
right.
over the last 30 years, Employment Equity Act has been there. So if a person says I've not been discriminated against, it's because there is legislation that forces companies.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
if you remove it, if you remove these quotas, why do you think it will happen? Because that was your argument, that it will happen voluntarily on the basis of, the fact that business people just look for skills. They don't see color, they don't see gender.
You're not listening to me.
Okay.
We said we have not. First of all, this case got nothing to do with removing the Employment Equity Act.
Okay.
And Mr. Vavi had a lot of time to try and explain his case and why he believes that Section 15A hasn't been removed. He didn't mention that once. He gave us a gratuitous attack on the Democratic Alliance. It's a sign that he's got no argument, because he could only argue about an attack on the Democratic Alliance. He can't argue the 15A. The bottom line is, when you don't answer and you start going into history and you start going into attack on the party because it's a party, etc., etc., it's all very well, and I'm not intending to answer him, and I'm not attacking any political party. I don't intend to. What I intend to do is to tell you that to hit a target, regardless of any other factor, is unfair in terms of our Constitution. The judges have all said, up until now, we're hoping this judge has said the same, that to set a target, regardless of anything else, and regardless of the fact that you go out and consult, you go out, we don't know who she consulted with, by the way. We also don't know who she took advice from, because when we ask the question in Parliament, we don't get an answer for that. The bottom line is, it is unconstitutional. This is an unfair discrimination. It's not fair discrimination. Okay. And that's what we're talking about today.
Okay. Mr. Vavi, in what way is 15A consistent with the Constitution? Let's take it on those bases, as Mr. Michael asks. Please break down for us. I think maybe I thought in my assessment you did, but you could patiently again say, in what way do you think 15A is consistent with fair discrimination?
Okay, so we agree, at least now, that the Constitution does allow fair discrimination in order to redress, and that the employment equity is an instrument to advance the Constitution, and that Section 15A now says the minister may, after consultation, identify national economic sectors, and determine numeral targets to ensure equitable representation. And here's the important point, of suitably qualified people from designated groups at all occupational levels in the workplace. The DAs are taking that as a quota system. It then says that, look, the minister may publish for everybody to comment in 30 days, and when doing so, will take into consideration the demographic profile of national, regional, economically active population, and will make sure that when it does that, it looks at what has been the progress in terms of meeting the targets, which the DA says it agrees with, because that's what is employment is in the original employment equity in any case. So that's what they are opposed to. Now, during that discussion, his introduction, he didn't tell you the full truth about the small business. He says small business will be throttled, and that we need small businesses in the Western Cape. We are promoting small businesses and all of that. But let me tell you what does the Act says, Dr. Ndlozi.
Yeah.
The Act says the small employers, and who are the small employers according to this Act? All those who are employing fewer than 50 employees are exempted from submitting employment equity reports, from preparing and implementing employment equity plans, from the numeral targets in compliance with Section 15A, from applying for certificate of compliance under the Section 53 to do business with the state. So if you are an employer employing less than 50 people, you are exempted. Mike is telling us that no, this thing will be very bad for small businesses.
No. I think he agreed. GS, that that is he actually called it a new development, which they welcome. He made a recognition. I think there we agreed that small businesses of 50, less than 50 employees, can be exempted, and he actually welcomed that very much. Am I right, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And hopefully it comes in.
Well, we want to come back to the other points.
Dr. Ndlozi, this
yes.
is operational from the 1st of January this year. There's no hope that if it comes in, it is operational. They are taking an existing legislation.
Okay.
And it's
not operational, not yet. It's not operational yet.
All right. Let me take the two calls, and then we'll get back to you, gentlemen. It's Tebucho from Pitori. Welcome to Power Talk, and please.
Hi, Doctor. Good morning.
Yes, you've got 1 minute. The pressure of time.
Oh gosh, let me just weigh in, Mr. Vavi, and you, maybe Doctor. Mr. Babi quote what is in the books, but the reality is, the reality is, Doctor, if you can go to the workplace, it's not the way he said it. At the workplace, the company parachuted the people from the trade union to come and occupy the high position. For example, in Transnet, we're having an executive with grade 12, a CE with a teacher's diploma. Now, it doesn't mean when the whole HR is black, it means there's equality there, or it means there's equality there. And again, at the company, if you can go now to the workplace, the African who had earn more money when they exist, the black people at the HR, they reduce those salaries to the black to the black people.
Okay, Tebo, I think your point is made. Thank you very much for your contribution. I'll put it to Mr. Vavi. Sipho in Orlando East, you've got 1 minute as well. Welcome to Power Talk.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ndlozi, without the waste of time. Firstly, I just want to make a disclaimer that I'm not opposed to employment equity. But my challenge really is to Mr. Vavi. I mean, he's been a unionist for quite some time. For me, it's just a Tom and Jerry syndrome that's happening. My question to Mr. Vavi, the monies that are contributed to your unions, why don't you utilize that money to create black business? Because I think you've got a muscle to do it, but it seems like you're comfortable to be playing Tom and Jerry now and again. Because at the end of the day...
What do you mean by Tom and Jerry, Sipho?
I mean, you will be coming and saying, we want an increase. I think the unions, for me, they appeal as people who...
Okay, how much do unions make? Let me hear. Maybe let's say, how much do you think NUMSA makes out of membership of workers?
It depends on how much they contribute.
But do you know, you've made a statement that they can create jobs.
I'm looking at the number of, okay, let's take the number that COSATU used to have.
No. COSATU doesn't have members. Unions affiliated to COSATU have members. So I'm giving you an example. Okay. Let's take SAFTU. How much do you think SAFTU makes out of membership?
I wouldn't know the exact figure.
I think let's go find out first before we think they can make contributions to job creation.
I just want you to understand my thinking behind what I'm saying. I'm not saying because of, I know that they have a large number. We can take a figure of 200,000.
Sipho, it's unfair to say he's Tom and Jerry, but you don't know the numbers. You don't know whether they can create jobs or not. I think it's unfair.
You don't understand where I'm going with my question. Okay,
you haven't told us yet. Vavi's Tom and Jerry, because instead of asking for raises, he must create jobs. And he must create jobs using workers' money of membership. I ask you, how much do you think that money is?
They are currently using workers' money to invest it. That's a fact. So what those are
pension funds, Sipho. All right, I think we don't have time. We'll try and get back to you. We don't have time for all of that. I apologize that I have to cut you. Michael, your last parting shot, maybe in 3 minutes, you can encompass the rest of the comments that Mr. Vavi made.
Well, I strongly believe there's an absolute need for unions. So the last caller, I don't think is fair at all. They're doing a fantastic job and they're helping out employees. Hopefully it becomes more workerist. Unlike COSATU, SAFTU is at least gunning down on workerist issues. So well done to Mr. Vavi for that. No matter how much we disagree, I still believe it's vital for the economy. The second thing is the DA very strongly believes in redress. We want to see the redress because without the redress, our economy is going to suffer. There aren't enough whites anyway, and it's dwindling. The whites are dwindling. Take 30 years' time, there'll probably be a handful of old whites sitting here. So the economy is going to suffer. I'm hoping to live out the rest of my life in happiness and peace. I'm not planning to leave the country. And as a member of the DA, we strongly believe that this economy has to float as much as it can and has to get stronger and stronger. And it will, by hook or crook, have to have the demographics of the country. Thirdly, this court case is very focused on a small point. It's not focused on the Employment Equity Act or its existence. I personally don't believe it should be in existence because I believe it's social engineering, but that's not what this is about right now. What it's about right now is to not have targets set, because you might have a company sitting in KwaZulu-Natal that's completely 100% Indian, and regardless of what they do, they're going to have to retrench some of the Indians to make way to reflect the black population, the white population. They're going to have to bring in some whites. I think it's just plain and simple unfair discrimination. Not fair. Our Constitution says fair discrimination. You've got to take into account the points. When you ask the minister How can you do that as a blanket, one-fits-all approach? And the minister cannot answer that. In fact, the lawyers couldn't answer that in the actual court case itself.
Okay.
We're all on the same page. We believe in redress. We're merely
Okay.
talking about the way to get there.
Okay. GS, your last parting shot.
Thank you, Mike, for the compliments. But we still disagree on some of the issues that that's fine. We still disagree on some of the points that we're making. As a lawyer, you have not seen a single person coming to your office to say, look, I'm a white male, I'm young, I'm a woman, I'm white, I'm an Indian, or I'm a so-called colored. I have been dismissed at my workplace because I'm white, or I'm Indian, or I'm colored, or I'm black, in order to make way for somebody with disabilities. And here is a letter of my dismissal. This is the reason. It doesn't work like that. This is just pure scaremongering by the DA. That's how they are mobilizing the so-called colored communities. Of course, they playing into what Jimmy Mange once said, which was awfully wrong, to say colored people are going to be distributed all over the country in the name of employment equity. There's no such a thing that is going to happen. The employment targets are not going to compel the employers to dismiss people from their jobs. This is inspirational. This is about saying, give us a plan over your next year, 2, 4, 5. How are you going to be reaching the targets so that your employment levels at all categories reflect the demographics of the country? Give us a plan. And nobody will ever submit a plan that say, in order to meet these targets, I'm going to have to retrench whites and in order to make a space for black people. It will not work like that. To keep on harping on that is scaremongering, is meant to mobilize the minority communities of South Africa against the government, against the legislation, in order to protect the privileges of that were accumulated during the era of colonialism and apartheid.
Okay. Thank you both, Michael Bagraim, labor expert and DA spokesperson on labor. Thanks very much for creating time and for coming here on Power Talk, as well as the General Secretary of SAFTU, Zwelinzima, Vavi. That's the conversation, Bantwana Benkosi, with regards to the Employment Equity Act. And from me, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, and the team, Dintanda Nonke Makhaya.